Does this sound familiar? You spent months studying Portuguese only to land in Portugal and wonder if the language you hear out on the streets is the same one you've been learning? If you've been shocked at how different Portuguese sounds from the textbook audio materials, I'm not surprised. But in order to make your hard work pay off in real-life conversations, I need to show you why listening to perfect Portuguese alone can leave you lost, when it can actually be helpful, and what to listen to instead. What I'm talking about here is Cinderella Portuguese, that version of the language which has crystal clear pronunciation. Obrigado, when we often just say obrigado. Or even onde é que ele está, when we may slur these 5 words into only 2 sounds. Onde é que ele está? Don't get me wrong, these audios, especially for beginners, mean well. It's a lot to take in when you're learning a foreign language, especially if it's your first. Still, it creates false expectations now and frustration later on. A classical example of this is the verb estar, one of the verbs to be in Portuguese. It's quite common for us to drop the sh at the start of the verb in whichever combination. In the previous example, I didn't say está, but tá. It's possible you will hear us say estou, estás, está, estamos, estão, estão, but hearing tu, estás, está, estamos, estão, estão is not unusual. This even gets us into trouble because a lot of times we forget that in the past, tivemos is also the past tense of the verb ter. But anyway. On top of the perfect pronunciation, sometimes Cinderella Portuguese exposes you to a very odd intonation. No one says, quando ele saiu de casa, estava a chover muito. Not only does this impact your understanding of the real thing, but your pronunciation will also be affected. This unschooler had done the A1 and A2 government courses and yet couldn't talk to her neighbors. After 2 weeks within the language and school, she started understanding how we really speak and training her ear in such a way that she impressed people at the gym when greeting them in a more natural, less robotic way, and also when she saw the lady that had been helping her with pronunciation when reading Portuguese out loud. Even if the initial shock of how we slur and run words together into an indistinguishable mush of sounds is big, it saves you time. It's a no-brainer that it's much harder to undo bad habits regarding pronunciation or retraining your ear than getting it right from the get-go. Listen to this unschooler who, after 1 month, could pronounce pretty well one of the hardest words in Portuguese, cabeleireiro.
Cabeleireiro.
Or this unschooler, another native English speaker who is learning a foreign language for the first time at 60 years old and can sound so natural when saying que eu vejo mais? What else do I see?
O que eu vejo mais?
You may be surprised to hear that despite all the criticism I make of Cinderella Portuguese, I'm not totally against it. Let me show you how much of it and when it can be really useful. So when you're starting out and the gap between how we write and how we speak is still very large, it's immensely helpful to have some exposure to Cinderella Portuguese, but only about 10%. In my opinion, you should be able to tick all these boxes for this sort of perfect Portuguese to be beneficial. Number 1, the content should be engaging, memorable, with lots of visual cues, and yes, spoken at a lower pace. Number 2, this is important, slowing down does not mean words will be pronounced individually. I'm not talking about divorcing words for good. What I mean is spoken naturally with all the slurring and marrying of words, but said slowly and repeatedly to give time to the listener to digest it all. Number 3, combine that real Portuguese with, you guessed it, Cinderella Portuguese. So, going back to the example I used earlier, that could sound like onde é que ele está? Onde é que ele está? Onde é que ele está? If you think about it, in the film, that version of Cinderella, all dressed up in a pretty dress, ready to live happily ever after, only makes a short appearance at the end, right? Your exposure to Portuguese should also reflect that. Tons of real Portuguese with only some sprinkles of Cinderella to help you recognize words versus sounds. And what does this mean in practical terms? Well, for this unschooler who'd spent a couple of years on courses and different tutors, after 4 months of unschooling, was finally able to connect to the girls she visits at a children's home. I promise I'm going to share how you can listen to more real Portuguese that doesn't make you want to throw in the towel. But there's something I just thought of that I want to share. Have you ever been bothered by the fact that Prince decides to marry Cinderella just because of a shoe fits? He doesn't even recognize her face without the gown. That's exactly what happens when you only study textbook Portuguese. You're looking for a perfect fit that doesn't actually exist in the real world. You might find the shoe, but you won't recognize the person, or in this case, the language, standing right in front of you. Don't fall in love with the shoe. Learn to love the person in their everyday clothes, slurs, shortcuts, and all that. You can have a free sample of a story told in real Portuguese in my mini start. Just check the link below. The story and the exercises will improve your vocabulary in a natural way, but above all, help you focus on the patterns of how we speak.